Yo, 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 visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasping the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bankroll. Sunday grind and picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions we hold. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday, it is NFL, the extra points, the big show, week 5. 2024, Sunday, October the 6th, the Shark and the Gun. Anthony Latino, the odds fellow, in London live as we are playing the Vikings right now. Guns picks. What's going on, brother?
Man, I am wearing the hat for a reason because I just covered a over on the win total with Indiana. Only took them 6 games. Not a big deal because Kurt Signetti is a winner. But we're not talking college football. We're talking NFL. We have the picks that pay the bills. We're on a little bit of a heater last 2 weeks. If you've been following along, you've been cashing some goddamn tickets. Shark, let's talk about some week 5 action. Let's go.
1 o'clock, Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. The first collaboration play of this broadcast. The Gun is the fan. He usually has the jersey on and the hat on. Not today. A collaboration play. Guns open the conversation. New England money line plus 108.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I kind of forgot to put the hat on today because I wanted to show off this Indiana Hoosier hat. But let's talk about this game here for a second. You got Miami coming into a short week after a loss to Tennessee on Monday Night Football, 31-12, putting up only 184 yards of total offense, minus 60 net yards in that game. They're 1-3 on the year with a minus 15-point differential and a plus 3 net yard average. And of course, New England 1-3 on the year, coming off a back-to-back road trip. Their loss to San Francisco last week, brutal 130-13 with minus 215 net yards for the game. Now, New England has lost 3 straight since their win versus Cincinnati on the road. However, they had 3 road games in their last 4 games. They had to travel to Cincinnati, then back home to Seattle, then go to face the Jets on Thursday Night Football, then all the way to the West Coast in San Francisco. So they had this brutal trip back and forth to start the season. And of course, Miami just in a different situation. They played 3 straight home games in the past. Actually, they played 3 home games in 4 weeks. So that team is not a comfortable spot going on the road here. Their only road game Miami had was Seattle going on to the West Coast, lost 24-3. Of course, no Tua in that game, only putting up 205 yards total offense, minus 165 net yard average. They also had a +2 turnover ratio in that game and still only scored 3 points. Don't know how that happened, but it did. And then they've played the same team, both these squads. They played Seattle, but New England played Seattle much better, taking them to overtime, only losing the game by 3 points. He had a minus 48 net yards, putting up 310 yards of total offense. So you see what one team can do versus the other team. Granted, a different type of situational spots, one road, one home. But I digress. I think New England played Seattle better. New England is on the first leg of a home back-to-back as well, where Miami is on the first leg of a road back-to-back. So they're looking at 4 road games in the next 5 games, Miami is. Miami is also dealing with a lot of key injuries. If you look at the injury report, it's pretty much a laundry list. The linebacker corps is banged up. The secondary is banged up, which will benefit New England, especially with Miami playing on a short week. And then you got New England has lost 5 out of the last 6 games versus Miami, 0-6 ATS in that sample size. But the home team is 6-2 straight up when these teams meet. Miami is also 1-5 ATS as away dog since 2023. And then Miami's offense is just struggling since losing Tua. They've only scored 10, 3, and 12 points in 3 games without Tua in the lineup. And they face the 28th toughest schedule, by the way. It's not like they're facing these bigger teams. They're getting beat by weaker opponents. And then on New England side, they've actually put up, not a lot of points. I'll give you that, 16, 23, and 13. But their first 4 games, but they had the 6th toughest schedule in those spots. So take that with a grain of salt. I think New England's just the better team in the situation, especially without Tua in the lineup. I don't care who the quarterback is for Miami. It could be Huntley. It could be me. It could be Shark. It could be your mother, your sister, your brother. Doesn't matter. I know New England's the spot here. So New England, money line, plus 108 is the play.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think you or I could be a quarterback upgrade for this Dolphins team. And you're making great points. You said it, all the points I was going to say. So I'll just jump off a couple points of emphasis here. Go back to that Buffalo game. Tua, 3 picks, then injured. Skylar Thompson blown out, as you said, on the West Coast. I think people thought Tyler Huntley was going to be an upgrade last week. He was not. And truthfully, I think seeing how he performed, it really gives a showcase to how much he was propped up by the Baltimore scheme. This guy looked absolutely useless last week. 96 yards passing, 12.1 QBR. And as you mentioned, Miami has dominated this matchup in the Tua window here. 2 margin wins last year, by 7 in New England, by 14 in Miami, October 29th last year. And you talk about the line spoke. Heavy line at home for Miami, minus 7.5. New England opens as a favorite. We talk about this every week. Let the books tell you the story. Why is New England favored? This Miami team is in shambles. This quarterback situation is abysmal, and they get a bye week next week. Not all bye weeks are created equally, but I think this is where they're going to kind of bottom out here again after really getting demolished by the previous winless Titans on Monday Night Football. Reset in the bye, try to maybe acquire another quarterback, figure something out. We talk about this funeral vibes type of game. I think this is the funeral vibes game for Miami, not a bounce back. They really are the gift that keeps on giving this season. 0-4 ATS, getting worse. And as you mentioned, the 6th hardest schedule for New England, it was actually per DVOA. We know our guy Oddsfellow loves that metric point. The number 1 hardest schedule in the league. And, of course, coming off of back-to-back games at the Jets, had to go out to San Francisco. San Francisco off a loss, back-to-back losses. You couldn't get a worse spot to play San Francisco. Love the Patriots today. Take it at minus 115 or plus 108, and let's dominate. I put a poll on Twitter because I didn't really have an edge in this game. I thought this is probably the hardest game to handicap in the 1 o'clock slate from an ATS side, but going to Washington, 3-1 Commanders, scorching hot to the surprise of many, including myself, hosting the Browns. The Browns are enigmatic, a lot of moving parts. I don't think anybody really knows what to expect from the Browns in this spot today, but the gun does like the running game situation. Jerome Ford over yards and over attempts.
Yeah, I think when we look at Washington and at least the games that they play so far in that sample size, you can take advantage of the rushing props on this one. Now, Cleveland is facing a Washington team that is ranked 20th in rush DVOA. And of course, I'm using a lot of Oddsfellow statistics here. And going back to that New England game, when I said 4th toughest schedule, I said 4th toughest schedule that they face currently. Their full schedule, yes, you're right, Shark, is number 1 toughest. Now we look at Washington. They faced Tampa, the Giants, Cincinnati, and Arizona so far. So let's break that down here for a second. You have Tampa ran the ball 30 times, which is the most rushing attempts that they've had all season long. This is a pass-oriented team. They put up 112 rushing yards, which was their best rush performance all season. Then we got to look at the Giants. They put up 5.9 yards per carry versus Washington, 129 rushing yards, and that was their top rushing result all season. Then Cincinnati put up 6.2 yards per carry on the ground versus Washington on 20 attempts, which was their best rushing performance all season. And Arizona ran the ball for 181 rushing yards on 32 carries, 5.7 yards per carry versus Washington, which is their second best rushing result. Their first best rushing result was against the Rams, who were ranked 31st in defensive rush DVOA. So you can see that, Arizona might have been the second best performance versus Washington, but they played a worse rushing defense in a couple weeks prior. And then you got to look at Jerome Ford. He's the top running back for Cleveland besides Deshaun Watson. He runs for 5.2 yards per carry this season, and he averages about 10 carries per game. And Cleveland will most likely take advantage of the run because their passing has struggled so much. And now a lot of that has to do with their offensive line, kind of diminished. They give up a 12.8% sack rate so far this season, which is ranked 30th in the league. And just look at Jerome Ford. I also like the Deshaun Watson props. I lean towards that one as well. I think you can get those at 26.5 currently on the rushing yards, but I'm going to look at Jerome Ford as the top running back for Cleveland to get a lot of yak on the ground here. So give me Jerome Ford over 43.5 rushing yards and Jerome Ford over rush attempts 10.5 as the props.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this game, really, really difficult stuff. Our guy Ziggy Balls in the chat. What's going on, brother? Says his pick is Browns plus 3.5. And I think if you get 3.5, definitely a great line number there. It's been at 3 for most of the week. When I was really going through this, the question mark for me, is Washington just too hot? Or is this who we can expect Washington to be? And, when I start to go back to the first week of the season where they did get blown out in Tampa Bay, 37-20, that lingers in my mind that this team does have a bit of a dark side to them. And we did see incredible performances at Cincinnati, but I think that was potentially Jaden Daniels showing up against also ex-LSU quarterback Joe Burrow and a Heisman versus Heisman environment. Last week, same thing. Road game, Heisman versus Heisman. Deshaun Watson here. Guns, did he win a Heisman as well? I think he did, didn't he?
Deshaun Watson.
Or no?
I don't think so. That doesn't ring a bell. I'll look it up, though.
Regardless, elite college quarterback. But
yeah,
I think at some point, Washington is going to come the other direction. They have to. This team's not going to run the table here to close the season with 17 straight wins. Let's just be perfectly honest. And Cleveland on this figure on the road, we've already seen 2 spots as a road dog outside of the division. Covered and won outright in Jacksonville. Did lose last week in Vegas. I think the Vegas game is maybe more symptomatic to how this team is going to play because Jacksonville has been absolutely abysmal this year. So I would lean towards Cleveland, but I think the game is incredibly difficult.
He finished third in the voting on the Heisman in 2015. So he did
absolutely. So the Heisman versus Heisman motivation is not there, but nonetheless, this is still a young quarterback versus a guy. Crazily enough, he probably looked up to actually while he was in high school. Deshaun Watson,
actually runner-up in 2016. So yeah, he got there, but he didn't get there. So
yeah. So this could be a hero type of game. Crazy enough, obviously Deshaun Watson's career hasn't played out the way people thought on and off the field. But Jaden Daniels at his age point versus where Deshaun Watson was coming into college could have definitely looked up to this guy without question. So a lot of moving parts there. No play for us. Guns on Jerome Ford over 40.5 rushes and 10.5 attempts. Speaking of Jacksonville, we're going to Jacksonville. I'm taking the Colts at +3. You're going to get 3.5 now. That's because Joe Flacco is the starting quarterback today. Ultimately, I think this is a deep psychological conversation. I've seen all over X, all over the internet, sharps like the Jags this week. I have to disagree. When you see Trevor Lawrence lose 9 consecutive ball games, that's a ton of ball games in a row in professional football. Just as a point of reference, maybe to use a little hyperbole so people can visualize just how egregious that is. That's comparable to losing 90 straight baseball games. Imagine if a team lost 90 straight baseball games. People would say fire the entire staff. Having lost 9 for the number 1 overall pick in 2021 is absolutely inexcusable. And I think Doug Peterson has lost this group completely. I don't think he was a great psychological manager from the start. I think he's a very above average offensive play caller. You saw him win the title with the Eagles. You saw him take the Jags to the playoffs 2 years ago. But this has been a precipitous fall. And Guns and I were talking about this actually the other night before or after the college football show. Some really ugly quotes coming out from Doug Peterson, blaming the group, basically taking no responsibility as a coach, saying this is not about speeches or rah-rah anymore. I thought to myself, bro, you're a professional football coach. You're supposed to be an army general, a leader. Get your guys off the dirt and back up. That's a huge part of your job. You're just not X's and O's. Leave that to the coordinators more often than not. I think this guy is so far gone. And really honing in on this spot, even more specifically, This is the final home game of this window before Jacksonville goes to London. Jacksonville is basically London's home team, as you guys know. They've been playing there for a decade, roughly, or more. The fans over there love them. They were the first team that NFL really marketed to London, and they do play well in London. However, they do not play well at home the game before London in the Trevor Lawrence era, going 0-3 straight up in ATS the last 3 seasons. Furthermore, on that, they're coming off of a road cover at Houston, plus 6.5 did cash last week. Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence is 1-6 ATS at home, coming off a previous road cover. So if they play well on the road, they don't play well here at home in North Florida. And they have the look ahead to London. Final point on this, Joe Flacco, since resuming his career last year, is 5-2 ATS in his last 7 ball games. 5-1 ATS in the regular season. This guy plays well. He opens it up. He slings the rock. This game will be up and down. And final point on this, Indianapolis is 0-9 straight up last 9 games in Jacksonville. You talk about a buy low. People want to buy low Jags, as I just described for a couple of minutes here. Let's talk about buying low Indy. Indy's gotten their ass kicked in Jacksonville for a decade straight by 16.1 points per game. Trevor Lawrence by 18.7 points per game. So think about that. Trevor Lawrence has won 3 straight games on average by 19 points against this team and is now only laying a field goal. This is actually shorter than it was last year. Last time these teams played, October 15th, 2023. Jacksonville 37, Indianapolis 20, Jacksonville -4. This opened at 2.5. This speaks to Jacksonville winning this game by 1 point at most, and maybe a first win for Indianapolis and Shane Steichen in Jacksonville in this window. Love the Colts in this spot. A lot of conversation. It's deep psychology. It is statistics, an opportunity to dominate. Take the Colts on the road at +3, +3.5. Next play, another collaboration play. Staying in this division, home team AFC South, CJ Stroud and the boys at NRG Stadium, 1 o'clock. An elite matchup pitting 2 playoff teams from last year. Buffalo off a blowout loss. We like the Texans. We don't love every bounce back. Guns picks. Houston, money line, official.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect Houston spot here in NRG Stadium, Houston, Texas, 1 p.m. kick versus the Buffalo Bills. They ain't circling the wagons today, boys. We got Houston 3-1 on the year, 24-20 win over Jacksonville, plus 191 net yard average, -4 point differential on the year. But you got a Buffalo team coming off a primetime loss versus Baltimore. They can lose the same game twice, if you know what I'm talking about. They only put up 236 yards of total offense in that game. They're 3-1 on the year, plus 10 point differential, but they're -16 in net yard average on the year. And Houston strengthened their defense. They hold their opponents to 274 yards per game, 57.3% pass completion rate, 161 passing yards per game, and a 12% sack rate. And then when you look at Buffalo, they give up a 4.8% sack rate on the season. But look at the defenses they have faced. Arizona ranked 16th in sack percentage. Miami ranked 19th in sack percentage. Jacksonville ranked 28th in sack percentage. And then Baltimore last week ranked 15th in sack percentage. And they're going against a Houston team that is ranked 5th in the league in sack percentage. So look for pressure on Josh Allen all day long. And Houston is a bad team on the road outside the division. They're 1-5 straight up in ATS in those spots, losing by an average margin of 11 points per game. Keep that in your pocket down the road. Then Houston at home versus non-divisional opponents, much different story. 6-1 straight up with an average margin of victory of 5 points per game. Complete shift from one side to the other, depending on the situation. Then Buffalo is 7-12 ATS versus non-divisional opponents in their last 19. Buffalo is also in a look ahead here. They have a big divisional game on the road versus the New York Jets next week. So the hungry team here, in my opinion, is Houston. I know that Buffalo's coming off that bad loss versus Baltimore in prime time, and they want to get their pound of flesh. But I don't think it's here because this Texan team performs situationally much better at home versus non-divisional opponents than Buffalo does. And I've been watching a lot of the press conferences with D'Amico Ryans. He is saying the right things to be motivating his team. He's a terrific coach. He's got those guys lined up where he needs them to be. He understands what the situation is here, especially playing at home versus a big opponent, a playoff contender for that matter. I think Houston gets it done here. Don't worry about the spread here. Just take them on the money line. I got Houston minus 118 as the play.
Completely agreed. And just jumping off that, of course, the gun, yet again, making a lot of great data points for our collaboration plays. But I want to jump off that psychology because we're sitting here talking about the coaches and how they really reflect on the group and their ability to motivate or not motivate. D'Amico Ryans is a great coach. In my opinion, he's a top 5 psychological manager within the league. And I think if you really look at what he did in his career, it starts there. He played for the Texans. He loves this franchise. He's a total gamer himself as a player. And he's honestly still very young and athletic. You see him on the sideline. I feel like he could strap it up and go play middle linebacker for this team right now. Yeah. And that energy really does pervade this locker room. But not only that, CJ Stroud, as we've discussed a few times already on this show this year and the end of last year, this guy has the mind of a 30-year-old. He's very mature, very, very mature. He's well-refined. He's notably religious. We're not going to necessarily say that that's good or bad, but it is one thing. It centers you. You believe in positive energy, and you believe in the ability to execute your plan. And I think that's exactly what he does. And as Guns mentioned, this guy is great at home outside of the division in his career, 5-1-1 ATS, and he just keeps getting better in this spot, if we're being honest. And I think a second layer of psychology, which Guns did not mention, which I think will hold a lot of weight in today's game. This is the first game Stephon Diggs is playing against his old team. We're not entirely sure how it went down for him to leave the Bills, but I don't think it was the most fluid leaving there, departure, whatever you want to call it. So I think he's going to have revenge on his mind. I think that's going to be a huge talking point in the locker room. I'm sure they're talking about it right now, 2 hours before kick. Houston will be absolutely live. And I think within this season, I think Guns touched on it, but I'll touch on it again. Houston's actually 0-4 ATS. So when you find a team that is of this quality, coaching, quarterback, and motivation, 0-4 ATS. It's like we bought the Falcons at home who were 0-3 ATS on Thursday Night Football. When you find a team at home sitting at this point in their statistical flow, you want to buy this team. And as Guns mentioned, Buffalo is just purely a sell. 3 wins against the Cardinals, Miami, Tua injured, picks, and Jacksonville, 47-10. I'm not impressed. Strong line number. Anecdotal maybe, but just as a point of reference, the last time these teams played, it was week 4, 2021 in Buffalo. I like this little trivia experiment we got going on here. Guess what Buffalo was laying at home the last time these teams played?
Oh, shoot. I'm going to say 6.5.
18.5.
Whoa.
And they blew them out 40-0. So you talk about, as I say, the league changes over incredibly quickly. Only 3 years removed, we go from Josh Allen at home minus 18.5 by 40 to a road underdog. Let that tell you the story. This is where Houston will turn up and dominate. Buy it, live it, love it. And let's dominate. Staying at 1 o'clock, a handful of games here we don't have a side on, but certainly worth conversation as we do run down every game because we know people like to bet games we might not like. So we try to give you guys the best information we have. 1 o'clock, Soldier Field, high noon in Chicago. Bears laying 4 to the Panthers. A lot going on in this game, surprisingly, I would say. Guns, any thoughts?
Yeah, wow, the offense is approved with Andy Dalton in the lineup. How's that figuring? He's throwing 65.4% pass completion rate, 6.9 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 1 INT since taking over the job. With this game, everybody loves Chicago right now, and I get it. Everybody is kind of hungry for a good Bears team, coming off a win versus the LA Rams, but the LA Rams are kind of broken. You only won by 6 points. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. You were minus 58 net yards in that game. You had a +2 turnover ratio, and then you gave up 4.6 yards per carry on the ground, and then a high completion rate to Stafford as well. And then you got Caleb Williams right now. Is he really doing anything great? He has a 4.9 yards per attempt passing. He's timid. He's not throwing he doesn't want to throw the ball deep. It looks like he's throwing a lot of screens and a lot of short passes, doing a lot of check downs because I think there's just a lack of confidence there. He also only has 3 touchdowns and 4 INTs this year. So statistically, is he really that good? I don't think so. I kind of lean towards the Carolina, and I said it before the show when I was talking to Shark. I was like, this Carolina team, is Andy Dalton just going to be carrying over on a little bit of a hot streak for a few weeks before he gets like a real good defense, or maybe are they going to play Atlanta next week? Is that the spot where you're just going to see a very gross performance by Carolina? I don't think this is the spot here to be jumping on the Bears. Last week we took the Bears. Last week it was a little bit dicey, but we got to the window and cashed the ticket. I don't think we do it here with Carolina. We stay away. I want to lean Carolina. I want to get to the window on this one. I'm not going to. I'm just going to watch this one. We need to see Chicago play maybe a few more road games, a couple more spots versus some good teams. I know they got Washington coming up after Jacksonville. Actually, they got to go to London next week, right? Yeah, they're going to London next week. So that could be a look ahead as well, thinking about that trip to jolly old London town. Maybe Carolina is the spot. We'll see. I'm leaning Carolina.
Yeah, this is going to be tough, and I really do think this is a brutal spot for the Bears. As our chat said, they're going to London next. I had it written down, and this is just one of those funky spots where you're coming off a cover, as Guns mentioned. You get this sleepy spot against Carolina, honestly, one of the most uninspiring teams in the league to get up for. And you got to go to London for a big game next week. So I think this is a tough spot for Chicago today. Chicago's been incredibly hot at home, dating back to last year, which is why we bought them at home numerous times in that window. They're 7-0 straight up at home. That is the longest home winning streak in the league. 6-1 ATS last 7 at home. At some point, like I said with the Washington conversation, at some point this is going to come to an end. Not sustainably. They're not going to lose 10 in a row, but they're due to give one back at least. And you saw a game played last year. Of course, the QB situation was vastly different last year. Was week 10, November 9th, 2023, Thursday Night Football. Bryce Young versus Tyson Bagent in Chicago. Chicago won 16-13. And the line was basically the same line, -3.5. So it just goes to show you when these teams play, obviously outside of the division, sometimes data deficient, but I think the books have this one pretty nailed. In my opinion, the best look in this game is actually the over. I think if you look at what Andy Dalton has been doing with this team, they are 2-0 to the over last 2. He did explode on offense in Las Vegas. He played pretty well last week against Cincinnati. A couple of inopportune turnovers, but still a lot of movement on the ball up and down the field. And as I mentioned, that game last year was 16-13, 39.5. This is 43.5, so it's higher. The line is telling you an over story. And we've seen Chicago play good defense at home, but I do think Caleb Williams will get into a better flow. There will be more points, and Carolina does not play any defense, as you see week to week. So I haven't been playing a lot of totals this year. I just don't love totals in the NFL, but I know the odds fellow does like this, and I think the over is an elite spot here. So if you guys want to bet this game, take the over. Expect Andy Dalton and the boys to potentially explode with points here. 28-27 or something like that is how I see it. So take the over, and let's keep it moving here. Next game at 1 o'clock. Ravens, Bengals. I have bet the Ravens 4 consecutive weeks. I am 2-2. So thank you, Ravens. Could have just done nothing and stayed there and got the same result. But thankfully, the Ravens did bounce back for us the previous 2 weeks. Big wins against the Cowboys, blowout on Sunday night against the Bills. Now you got to go in the division to Cincinnati. This is going to be a great game. This is one of those games you turn it on, you watch it, and you expect a real back and forth game. And I think the total at 48.5 does tell you that story as well. I think we're going to see a lot of points here. I think it'll be entertaining. I got some angles, but I'll throw it to the gun for some opening comments here.
Yeah, I think on this one, I'm kind of looking at the total right now. I'm seeing it sitting at 48.5. I know it's danced up to I think it got up to 50.5 sometime earlier in the week. So you've seen it start to tick down. Maybe the sharps are seeing some value into taking the under. And I kind of agree with them here. Divisional game, divisional rivalry. I know the history tells you different. They're 6-1 to the over in the last 7 meetings between these two teams. And really, these teams are playing over ball. It's like you look at their scoring in these games. You have Baltimore ranked 5th in scoring at 30.5 points per game, and you have Cincinnati team ranked 9th in scoring 25.5 points per game. But when is the levee going to break? Where's the ceiling? Is this the ceiling here? Even in opponent scoring, these teams are kind of ranked below the Mendoza line here, with Cincinnati ranked 27th in opponent scoring, and you have Baltimore ranked 19th in opponent scoring. I kind of just want to be the contrarian here and say this is probably an underlook. Like I said, this line was at 50.5 earlier in the week, and I know it opened at like 47.5, 48s out there, but it's going back to where it was on the opening line, which is kind of a little bit of an indicator that we may be looking at an under. I just think these two teams offensively are a little bit too hot. And then, I for some reason in my mind, I know these defenses have given up a lot of points. Baltimore, especially at home. Granted, they're on the road in this situation. The look aheads here, you have Baltimore going against Washington, and then Cincinnati's going to be going up against the Giants on the road next week. So there's not really a look ahead. It looks like a primetime game there for Cincinnati on the road. I just think that in this situation, we may be looking at a low scoring affair, a little bit of a dogfight. Lean towards the under. Not going to be taking this game. Just a wait and see and a watch type of situation for me.
Yeah, as I said when I introed this game, this is a really tough game. Really tough game. And this is one of these divisional games this week. I think is going to be a field goal game, and it could be even tighter. I think that Baltimore probably wins this game by 1 or 2 points, but Cincinnati could certainly win. I would lean towards Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is due for a home cover. They played terribly at home this year. 2 outright losses to New England and Washington. But again, this is the psychology of the Cincinnati team. We've said day after day, week after week, they don't focus unless the game really speaks to them in some way. So you can't necessarily look at their performances outside of the division versus these young quarterbacks and journeyman quarterbacks and say that's going to translate to how they play Baltimore at home. The only problem with taking Cincinnati here is that Baltimore is also still very due to continue their upward momentum. And Baltimore did take care of Cincinnati twice last year by 3 on the road, 14 at home. Baltimore matches up well here. This would be a spot I'd much prefer taking Cincinnati if Baltimore was 3-1 or 4-0.
For sure.
The fact that they're 2-2, they don't want to go 2-3 and give one in the division to really their arch rival at this point within this division. So the line is a little bit short for Baltimore. I just can't get there on either side of this game. A bunch of guys saying they got Bengals. I think you guys have a good idea. We just suspect this is going to be very difficult and tight.
I'll say this about Baltimore right now, because I was looking at their schedule. Ironically enough, they're 0-2 versus the AFC West, right? If you see that pattern going down the road, so they got Cincinnati, Washington, Tampa, and Cleveland. I can see them just kind of running the board there. And if that does happen, they got to go play Denver at home. Denver, kind of a pesky team on the road, knows how to play in the situation. We saw it with Tampa. I think that's a great spot to be taking Denver if that situation does happen. Knock on wood. I'll be hoping that situation does occur. But yeah, you said it best. If Baltimore was in the highs of highs, 4-0, 3-1, it'd be a different situation. Yes, take the Bengals. But this team has already gotten busted in the mouth. They already taste they've already been humbled. They're not going to be humbled again here versus divisional opponent. They know every single win is important moving forward. But I think if they get like another 4 wins under their belt, they're going to feel high and comfortable and be in the top 5 on the power rankings. Then they got to play a Denver team at home. So I'm looking forward to that game, not this one.
Yeah, and just to react to what Ziggy said here about the Bengals got their first win, I think they start rolling. At some point they will, but I don't know about Baltimore. And truthfully, last week against Carolina, I mean, they had a nice spurt in the middle of that game, but they didn't really get to the margin we expected. They covered, which was great, obviously, but it was a lot closer than it should have been. So I don't think this team is still playing at that level. And final point on this game, I think the coach there, Zach Taylor, he's another one of these guys. He's an ex-coordinator. He was a hot hire. He doesn't really strike me as the type of guy that has a ton of juice in the locker room. And I think that's the problem. I really do. I think this team needs an older coach, a disciplinarian, somebody who keeps them in line week to week and gets them jacked up, because these performances just are continuously lackluster with this team. And I think it does fall on the coach in some capacity. So a lot of conversation on that game. Best of luck there. 35 minutes going. We're going 4 o'clock slate here. We got a couple officials, and we have more officials at Monday night. So let's ramp the energy back up. Let's go to San Francisco. We're taking the Cardinals. I got it at 7.5. Guns got it at 7.5. A collaboration play. Guns picks. What's going on?
Yeah, I like Arizona in this spot. Levi Stadium, Santa Clara, California, 405 East is the kick. And you have an Arizona team that's 1-3 on the year, coming off a brutal loss on my Mona Lisa play that turned out to be a replica Rembrandt, whatever, that you buy on the street from some grifting vendor. Ugh, what a gross game. Minus 3-point differential on the year and minus 22 net yard average. And then you have San Francisco on the year is 2-2. Off a home win versus the New England Patriots, plus 5-point differential, plus 119 net yard average on the year. And I just think San Francisco, unimpressive in my opinion, as far as their wins go. They beat New York Jets in week 1 versus an aging quarterback coming back from a season-ending injury. And the other win was against New England Patriots, who are in a full rebuild, delete, might have the first pick of the draft next year type of rebuild. With the Arizona, despite their loss last week, possibly in that look ahead into this game. Whoops, missed that in the cap. They played a good Detroit team, kept them within a possession at home. Then they beat a Rams team that historically owned them by 31 points. And then they go and play a Buffalo team and on the road in their first game and had them against the wall. It was a 3-point game going into the fourth quarter, and they only lost by 6. So who's the better team here? I think Arizona can keep this thing competitive despite what happened to them last week. And San Francisco has won and covered 4 straight versus Arizona. But look at the numbers in those games. Arizona was favored by 14, 12, 10, and 14 in those games concurrently. When Arizona is a single-digit dog or less versus San Francisco, Arizona is 9-2 ATS. And guess what situation you have here is Arizona as a single-digit dog. And, of course, San Francisco is going to be on a short week look ahead, because guess who they have coming up? Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. Another big divisional game coming up on deck. I think Arizona has a shot here. They were 12-14 dogs against them in 2023, and now they are 7.5-point dogs. Significant line swing from game A to game B to game C. Give me Arizona plus 7.5 as the play.
Yeah, just jumping off it. Let's talk about that line you were talking about. In this Brock Purdy window, albeit a small one, this will be the 4th time he's playing the Cardinals. And let's go down these lines for a second. Minus 14.5, win by 25. Minus 15.5, win by 19. Minus 12.5, win by 16. So now you go from all those blowouts, all those big lines, down to 7.5. And this actually opened up at minus 6.5. I think Arizona could win this game outright, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Completely agree.
They play far better on the road with Kyler Murray. They're very well coached. As Guns mentioned, the Niners have to play in Seattle on Thursday night. That's a huge look-ahead game, particularly when they have dominated this team to this level in the Purdy window. And I think if you really look at Arizona, as Guns mentioned, forget the game last week. I actually think that they just really kind of bottomed out last week, actually. I think if you look at the first 3 weeks, they had a significant lead on the road in Buffalo to open the season, 17-3 in the second quarter. Did cover the spread, albeit lose late 34-28. Still a representative game against Buffalo there. Came back and hammered the Rams. You talk about reversal in the division here. The Rams had owned them for a huge window of time, and they turned up massively against the Rams. Nobody expected that, 41-10. And then they played the Lions real tight, as Guns mentioned, 20-13. A pick six was taken off the board. The game could have been tied. It could have gone the other direction. So they played 3 really, really solid above-average games against very good opponent types. And then they just let down last week. So whatever. Now you get the bounce back, and now you get a regression to that 3-game window, which I think is more indicative of who this team is, because I think they're very well coached. And again, reiterating, Steichen and Gannon are the coordinators from the Super Bowl team with the Eagles 2 years ago. These are very good coaches. They have good mentality. They will get their group going. And it's just a great buy low here. And plus 7.5 is a great number. Not going to belabor it too much. An opportunity to dominate. Arizona plus 7.5. Keeping it moving at 4 o'clock. The gun told me off the record he had this game circled in the middle of the summer.
That's right.
So somehow, July 4th barbecue party, Guns is having beers and burgers. He's thinking Giants Seahawks in October. And here we are, October the 6th in Seattle. Giants traveling on the road. Guns picks, plus 7 official.
Yeah, if you watch my NFC West preview that I did on Top Tier, I talked about this game in particular, that this was a bad situational spot for Seattle. And lo and behold, we're sitting here on this game. Like Shark said, I've had this circled since August, and we're going to be taking it here. Seattle 3-1 on the year. However, look at the teams they've beat so far. Denver, New England, and Miami. These guys are ranked below the Mendoza line in a lot of the key statistical categories, while Denver, once for week 1, new quarterback, Bo Nix. Denver's a better team than we thought they were going to be. I digress. They were not that team at that moment when Seattle faced them. And of course, the Giants have played much stiffer competition this season, playing Minnesota at home, who's ranked number 2 in Massey Power Rankings. Washington, who has played well and should have beaten them, but they lost their kicker in the first quarter. Actually, I think it was on the kickoff. The Giants lost them. And then, of course, they beat Cleveland. And then Dallas, who is ranked 10th in Massey Power Rankings. You can say what you want about Dallas. That was a divisional game that was closer than it was. A missed field goal here and there. The game could have went in the other direction. Then you have Seattle just in a terrible spot going into this game. And this is what Shark was alluding to when we talk about a terrible situational spot. They're coming off a Monday Night Football road loss to Detroit, which is a rivalry at this point, going 3 or 4 years now. And then now they're going to go play the Giants, coming off a mini bye because they played on Thursday Night Football last week. And then they have the Thursday night look ahead versus San Francisco, which we already talked about in the previous game. Seattle is going to play 3 games in 11 days. It is the worst of the worst situational spots ever for a team. No rest. You're licking your wounds. You're banged up. And you're going against rival versus rival, playing Detroit. And then you got to go play a Giants team with your divisional rival ahead on Thursday Night Football. I think they're in a bad spot here. And, of course, there is a revenge factor here with the Giants because the Giants got beat by Seattle 24-13 on Monday Night Football last season and are only plus 33 net yards in that game. Look at the box score, though. The deciding factor was a +3 turnover ratio for Seattle. That included a 97-yard interception TD return. And also Seattle got a fumble from the Giants on the Giants' 7-yard line, which led to a touchdown. 14 points outliers in that game. And of course, Seattle is 4-8 and 1 ATS as a home favorite since 2022. So while the Giants are not necessarily better than Seattle, I just think the rest advantage, the situational look ahead, and the fact that they have been reluctant to face a lighter schedule so far. This is why I like the Giants today, and the Giants are +7. Give it to me all day long. Giants +7. Might as well sprinkle on the money line while you're doing it.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree. As Guns mentioned, just an awful spot for Seattle. It doesn't get any worse. I think the reason why I'm not on the Giants here, I was just looking at Seattle and some of their outcomes so far, very sharp on the number. They did push a home line against Denver, -6, 26-20. They did push a road line at New England, -3. So it has nothing to do with Giants versus Seahawks. It's just how the books have this team weighted. I just think that they might be sharp on the line, but I couldn't disagree with anything Guns is saying here. And I do think the double revenge game holds a lot of weight. Obviously, taking margin losses 2 years in a row. Giants at Seattle by 14 2 years ago. And as Guns mentioned, last year in prime time at MetLife Stadium, a blowout. So double revenge game, a lot of motivation. And the Giants did travel well at this figure a couple of weeks ago at Cleveland. +6, I believe there, +7. And outright win. So I would never be on Seattle here. I couldn't talk you guys off of New York Giants if I'm really going down it. A couple more at 4 o'clock here. Let's talk divisional football. AFC West. Fox Sports now hosting the AFC. A little surprising there. I'm not sure what's going on with the contractual rights in the league, but I just looked at that. I'm like, wait, Fox has the Raiders-Broncos game? Anyway, Broncos coming home here, theoretically in a bad spot themselves, off back-to-back wins on the road outside of the division. But this is a huge game. So it's inherently a letdown. It's a sell high. It's also an environmental shift. But I don't know. I still think Denver might cover this spread. Guys, what do you think?
I agree with you. I think Denver could cover this spread. When you look at the situation, you got the Raiders are kind of on a hot streak versus Denver, 9 straight dating back to 2019. But their last matchup in Denver, the Broncos lost 17-16, but didn't really have a true quarterback at that time or a good defense. Now it's the polar opposite. Denver's got one of the better defenses in the league. They're holding their opponents to 257 yards per game of total offense and 146 yards passing. Denver gets a quarterback, gets to the quarterback as well with a 13.3% sack rate on the year. That's ranked number 1 in the league. And they're going against a Raiders line that has a 10.4% sack rate given up to opponents. That's ranked 26 in the league. So from the trenches, offensive line versus defensive line, Denver has a significant advantage. Then you got to look at the Raiders and a slew of injuries going on with that on the opposite side of the ball, including Devontae Adams, which, by the way, I don't know if that's an injury or him just saying, I don't want to play for this team anymore. They got 3 linemen on the injury report as well. And then you got to look at, key defenders that are on the injury report. So this team is tuned up, banged up, and going into a spot that is favorable for Denver here. I know the recent struggles with the Raiders offense. They're ranked 23rd in the NFL and will not perform any better versus the number 2 defense in the league. So I think that the only direction you can go with this one is taking the Broncos. And I think, was it 9X revenge angle here? And you got the Raiders with their back against the wall in a perfect spot for Denver to take over. I think this Denver team is just, they're better than I ever thought they were going to be. And Bo Nix is just being a nice game manager and taking care of the football. And he's getting better week to week. So, yeah, I think Denver's a spot here. That's the only direction I'd go with this game.
Yeah. Again, it's not a great spot theoretically, but it's crazy because we talked about a half hour ago how Indianapolis has lost 9 straight games by margin in Jacksonville. Here you are again, 9 in a row. What is it? 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. It's the number of the day, right, people. But these buy lows are very real. They're very real. And I think when you look at what Gunn said, with Devontae Adams on the trade block, and obviously probably maybe not so injured, until he's actually traded, it just kind of holds like a dark cloud over the locker room. It's like very, very disconnected. It's not a good vibe. And I think Antonio Pierce is a very good coach. I think he's a good motivator. It's funny, we were talking about Doug Peterson being schematic and having basically zero ability to motivate. I think Antonio Pierce is not particularly schematic, but it's just like 90% of his quality is the ability to motivate, which I think can hold them back in certain ways. I think they could probably use a sharper scheme in certain scenarios. But I think just the buy low is a very, very standout point. I think Sean Payton, if we're being honest, has been impressive so far. I think a lot of people thought, all right, he had a nice run, actually a great run, I would say, with the Saints for a long period of time. This oftentimes happens where a guy, slightly older coach, had a great run with one team, goes to another team, it just doesn't work out. It's like an old name, and it doesn't connect. And, last year it didn't look great, but I think Guns, what did you say about the quarterback situation last year? Not a real quarterback. Russell Wilson here, Mr. Unlimited, would not be thrilled with that comment.
I said what I said, and I meant what I said. They didn't have a quarterback, okay? And believe me, when Sean Payton took over the job there, he definitely didn't want Russell Wilson to run his offense, and that was apparent. And now with Sean Payton, with Bo Nix, granted, Bo Nix has got 4 interceptions with 1 touchdown, but he's progressed last 2 weeks on the road, 26-7, 10-9. He's performing. At least the defense is performing well. I'll say that. But I think with the defense, with the confidence that they have, it's easy for him to, even when he does make mistakes, the defense can pick up where he left off. So this is Denver to me all day.
Yeah, our guy Cody says Broncos -2.5. The line might be sharp. I think it could be sharp, but I do think 2 more points on this. Denver is actually 0-1 ATS at home. But I think key point there, as a home dog, Pittsburgh was laying 3.5 points and did control that game. So again, you talk about, do the books have this team weighted well? I think so. But I think, again, as a dog, they had them to that point. Now as a favorite, it probably comes the other direction. And if you saw what Las Vegas did in week 1 at the Chargers, very similar figure, -3 Chargers, 22-10. I think that's probably what you're going to see here. I think you're going to see a low-scoring game, and I think Denver probably does cover this spread. So take Denver. Even the money line's not a bad number. I think it's only like 140 or something like that. So I think you could get a decent price there. It is what it is. Take Denver. Don't take the Raiders in this game. Final game at 4 o'clock. 4:25. Packers-Rams. Big one here. Rematch of last year, but totally different scenario. Last year when the Packers hammered the Rams at Lambeau midseason, Matthew Stafford was hurt and Brett Rippon was the quarterback. A lot of moving parts here. I have some good notes. I'll throw it to the gun for some opening comments.
I mean, Rams are just, I feel bad for them. They're just banged up. They're going into every week. Sean McVay is trying to put some magic into this team and organizing it. I feel bad for him. He's trying to do the best he can with a turd that he's kind of inherited. They're so banged up offensively. Wide receiver weapons are dealing with it. Their offensive line is tuned up. They're coming off a loss versus the Bears, and they're just going to every single week. They're 1-3 on the year. They were reluctant to win that one, by the way, versus San Francisco, kind of getting that late pick by Brock Purdy and setting themselves up for a game-winning field goal. And you're on a little bit of a home stretch here for the next 3 weeks. You have Green Bay, you have the Vegas Raiders, and then you have Minnesota. So you have some tough games along the way. For me, I just overlook this game altogether just because I don't know who the Rams are, and I don't want to just automatically just fade them and just take the Packers on this one. So I think for a while, I'm just going to sit back and not take any Rams games for a while, just on the sheer fact that they're just not healthy. They need to get healthy. And maybe when they do get completely healthy, or at least mostly healthy, then maybe I'll start considering looking at Rams games again.
Yeah, it's just a tough game. And as Guns mentioned, the injuries are terrible. Puka Nacua setting all sorts of rookie records last year, obviously not in the lineup. And Cooper Kupp is one of the most reliable receivers in the league. So it's just not the same team. There's no way around it. And, McVay had made comments going back about a year, maybe a little over a year ago, about potentially taking some time off. I don't think he's retiring by any means, but maybe just, taking a year off, coming back somewhere else, whatever. And I think if you really look at this team, Gunn says he feels bad for them. I mean, they did win a championship 3 years ago. So, it's kind of like that classic environment. You really maybe overextend yourself, because I don't think anybody really had the Rams as that elite in that season.
But Sean McVay, has he had a team this bad since he's been the coach there? That's what I mean. That's what I mean by is like you would at least see them being kind of in that cusp of playoff contender, regardless of what was going on with the team. This is as bad as it gets. I'm just looking at the roster right now. IR. Everybody's on the IR. I mean, I don't know what you do, man. You just kind of go with the flow and just go to your general manager and just do this. I don't know what to tell you. That's it. I got nobody.
No, I agree. I think that McVay, this might be his last year with the Rams. I think that you win a title, you speculate that you're burned out. This year is taking on a really significant funeral vibes. As Guns mentioned, outside of a real backdoor against the Niners, they've been not great all year. They got blown out in Arizona. They didn't cover it in Chicago. And now you see Green Bay come over here. If you want to use some sort of like cross-reference between Chicago and Green Bay, I think Green Bay is a better team than Chicago. And they're also laying the same number, -3. I think it does lean towards Green Bay. I do think Jordan Love on the road is never something you are thrilled with. If you actually go back last year, outside of the playoffs, which he played incredibly well, obviously, in Dallas, and a real scrappy one in San Francisco in the second round last year. But go back to the regular season last year. He took an outright loss at Atlanta, at Las Vegas, at Denver, at Pittsburgh, at the Giants, and he didn't cover as a favorite at Carolina, still in the Bryce Young window. And then this year, he's 0-2 ATS. And when he got that contract extension in the middle of the summer, I commented on X. And as I always say, I'm not shading the guy. I'm just objectively analyzing what they did. He wasn't great outside of the playoff run last year. And people would say, well, the playoffs matter. I get it, but it's still a small sample. It's still a small sample. You caught a Dallas team who is now incapable of playing at home, terrible at home all of a sudden. And then you played a reasonable game and lost to the Niners. So it's never been great for this guy. He's only a second-year quarterback. These outcomes outside the division last year on the road are just ugly. Ugly. So anything can reverse. The law of averages suggests potential reversal. It's a strong line. It is a Green Bay line number from a strength perspective. Just a lot of moving parts. A lot of moving parts. Line number, Green Bay, but it's going to be tough. So taking a breath. Going to 8:25. Big game tonight. Cowboys at Pittsburgh. Cowboys now catching 3. Steam on Pittsburgh, interestingly enough. I don't think there's any principal injuries on either side of this game as far as I know. We were looking at this game the other night. Nothing official yet. I think the lean here probably comes towards Dallas, but I'll throw it to the gun here first.
There is injuries that we have to be concerned of. Micah Parsons out for this game. And then you got Trevin Diggs that is listed as questionable. So maybe the push there is more so on the defensive side of the ball here for Dallas. I in my head I was leaning towards the Pittsburgh side on this one. I haven't got there yet. It was something that I was going to look at post show just to see if I could find some angles in here. Of course, I was looking at I wanted to check the injuries reports as well. Looking at the Pittsburgh side, as far as the injuries go, it looks like one of their linebackers listed as Alex Highsmith, but everybody else looks like ready to go for this one. This could be a big game here for Pittsburgh. Knowing that Micah Parsons is going to be out for this game is very concerning to me. Maybe pushing me in. It leads me to believe that a key defender like that is almost like having TJ Watt. It's like TJ Watt, if he's out for the game, it makes you want to fade the Steelers. That gives me the same type of mentality when I look at the Cowboys. So seeing the line here at -2.5 is telling here at home. Total's 43.5. Haven't got there yet, but I lean towards the Steelers.
Just because of Micah Parsons, you think?
I just think it's not even that. It's like Trevin Diggs is banged up. They have other guys in that defense that's kind of tuned up right now. So it's just a lean. That's all I'm doing. It's like I haven't put it as official pick. I'm not confident. I may swing in a different direction if I do a little bit more reading before the game. So this is just something that right now it's not on my card. It's just a small lean towards the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, when I first looked at this, I thought I didn't really know where it was going to go and then I started looking at it, and I do lean towards Dallas, as I said. And what I'm looking at here is just situational analysis. As we said, Dallas was a very above average home team for a pretty long period of time, dating back about 2 or 3 seasons. And now they just can't play at home. They've been awful at home. But in that small window this year, they flipped to a road bye team, actually. Depending on the line you covered at the Giants. We were at 4.5 that covered. Some people pushed and 5.5 hit for the Giants. But point is, at least half the market cashed with Dallas at the Giants. And I think even more specifically, go back to week 1. 33-17 win at Cleveland. So outside the division, in this division, AFC North, this part of the country outdoors, similar type of team too in terms of the construction of it. You know, like a running quarterback who doesn't throw a lot, good defense. I think Cleveland and Pittsburgh are actually similarly constructed. Not saying the coach is the same or the quality is the same, but there's similar mentality there. And Dallas did hammer Cleveland by 16 points, and the line was the same thing. It was +2.5. So I think if you go based on that, they do perform well in this area on this line. And I think if you look at Pittsburgh, it's hard to argue that Pittsburgh has been really impressive. Catching the Falcons in the first game of the year with Kirk Cousins, where the Falcons were not in any sort of offensive flow at that point, 18-10, 6 field goals. Then they beat Denver, rookie quarterback, only his second game. Bo Nix's first home game, favored on the road. I don't know, not incredibly impressive. And then they got the Chargers when Justin Herbert was hurt. coming into the game, and then he got injured again. So none of those are like real standout. And then last week, taking a loss to the Colts. And Anthony Richardson didn't play for more than half of that game. So I don't think that Pittsburgh is overly impressive. I think they have a good defense. Somebody said under game. I could see the under, definitely. Although with some of the injuries for Dallas, you never know how much this might open up. But I don't think that the Pittsburgh offense is explosive in any context. So I could see the under. I think Dallas is probably the lean. These in terms of matchup history, it's really anecdotal. These teams have not played since 2020. This is your classic once every 4 years outside of the division in the other conference. The last time these teams played, Pittsburgh was laying 14 points in Dallas. It was Ben Roethlisberger versus Guns. Tell me if you ever heard of this guy. Quarterback for Dallas, November 8th, 2020, Garrett Gilbert.
No, I don't know. Garrett Gilbert.
I was like, because I mean, we obviously follow this sport very closely.
Yeah.
I was like, how have I never heard of this guy?
No.
SMU 2014 sixth round pick.
Oh God, that was like right after they got blackballed and they had to restart the program. That's getting into that territory. Yeah, that's beyond my comprehension for sure.
I mean, talk about one of the most obscure quarterbacks probably to ever start an NFL game, at least in the last 30 years.
What about Duck Hodges, man? I mean, coming out of the FCS for Pittsburgh and played in a primetime game and got them a win versus San Diego. That name is one that's for the record books there. But yeah, you're right. Gilbert, never heard of him.
No, definitely not. And the only time Prescott has ever faced the Steelers, it was actually his first year as a starter, 2016, which is actually kind of crazy to think that he's been around for 8 years now, 9 years. That game was played November 13th, 2016 in Pittsburgh. Dallas did win the game 35-30. It was a wild game. There were 3 touchdowns in the final 155 of the fourth quarter. Ezekiel Elliott, 32-yard touchdown run, 9 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. That's one of those games I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure that was an absolute classic to watch. Rookie Dak or second-year Dak, first year as a starter, 35-30 against late prime Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm sure that was an absolutely elite game. So I think Dak will play reasonably well here. I think the Cowboys have a buy low element. Again, I would lean towards Dallas, but not officially on it. Tomorrow night, big time stuff in Kansas City. My final official of the week, taking the Saints at +5.5. And this is just a continued conversation with Kansas City. Kansas City is 4-0 straight up. They're 2-2 ATS. They're 1-1 ATS at home. And I think if you really look at these games, they're very due to lose a game outright. Got dominated in the yardage versus Baltimore. Isaiah Likely, the final play, half-inch foot out of the end zone, whatever. Came back against Cincinnati at home, didn't cover. Needed a late field goal to win that game by 1. At Atlanta, could have lost the game. There was a sketchy non-call in a PI in the end zone. Atlanta not kicking field goals. If they kick 2 field goals, they win. Again, not impressive. And then last week, 17-10 at the Chargers. Herbert was hurt. The game was tied at 10 forever, it seemed like, in the middle of the game. The Chiefs have not been impressive really at all, and they have not had one win by more than 1 possession. And I think that speaks to it coming to an outright loss at some point. I really do. And I think this is just, again, where Kansas City has not been good at home in a long time. They're 12-15 ATS at home since the middle of 2021. And that's all as a favorite. They're well graded. They're essentially too big of a line every time. And key point, teams play up to them. Teams get up to play KC, where KC doesn't get up to play teams like this out of conference who they never play. There's no rivalry. And as I've said week after week, the Chiefs are the new Patriots. They're not planning on really turning up their quality until December if they don't have to. It's reserving energy. It's the fact they play every year until late January, early February. These games early season just don't mean a lot to them. And I think if you really look at New Orleans, 3-1 ATS, 2-0 ATS on the road. They've played well outside of really kind of a disastrous game against Philadelphia in week 3. And I think on this line structure, They were catching the same number actually in Dallas in week 2, plus 5.5, and hammered Dallas 44-19. And obviously, Dallas and Kansas City are not the same team. But I think from a perspective, Dallas has not played well at home, as I mentioned. Kansas City has not played well. And Dallas has not looked great early season. Kansas City has not looked great early season. Not dominant at all. I think New Orleans comes in here and plays their A game and probably wins this game outright on Monday Night Football. Love this spot, plus 5.5, 1 unit. Guns, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's the Saints are pass for me. I'm not high on the Chiefs at all this year. They have done nothing that's been impressive. They only have averaged 328 yards of total offense this year, 4.1 on the ground, 216 passing yards per game, and they've just had the lucky horseshoe going into these games. I thought Atlanta should have beaten them in prime time. And a missed PI call on 4th down, and we talked about it last week. Is situationally for the coach, the decision making down the stretch, knowing that you still had another possession, that you had to stop KC and get the ball back, regardless of whether you scored a touchdown or a field goal, and not kicking the field goal in that spot. Especially, you have one of the best kickers in Younghoe Koo. We saw it on Thursday Night Football. The dude can hit anything in his own stadium. And yeah, I mean, the Baltimore game, you lose, you win because you didn't wear the right shoes. You wore black shoes instead of white shoes, so it didn't blend in enough to get that touchdown. And then Cincinnati kind of gave the game away to you. I mean, you just hit lucky after lucky after lucky, and like Shark said, you've only won every single game by a possession. Eventually, the levee's got to break here, and then you just have a Saints team that's off back-to-back losses, kind of in dramatic fashion in each one of those situations. So going into this spot, playing your first AFC game, actually your AFC team all season, because you played nothing but NFC teams move up this far in primetime on Monday Night Football. I think the Saints give them a fight here and maybe come out with a win, because I just think that, with KC, it's just borrowed time. And guess who Kansas City has next week? They got to bye, and then they got to play San Francisco. Whether that's a look ahead, probably not, because of the bye. But I think this is a Saints or pass for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, Super Bowl rematch going forward 2 weeks. But again, this is where the bye week, as I always say, is not created equally for all teams. I think that the Chiefs are actually kind of just like crawling into the bye, and they're going to lose this game and then take a week off, get a break, and then come back. And again, speaking on the conversation with the Patriots, it was always like that with the Patriots too. Just before the bye week, don't get injured, don't do anything stupid, don't use all your big energy. And then after the bye week, come back, focus in. And as we said, this team, last week I said, they don't need to go better than 10-7 this year to make the playoffs. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do. I don't see them losing 7 games, let alone maybe 4. But I do think there's a lot of parity in this sport in the AFC. And as you saw last year, they didn't have the 1 seed last year, and they still won the Super Bowl. So they know they don't even need the 1 seed. So there's just it's a subconscious thing almost. When you don't need to bring your absolute A game, at least at that point on the calendar, you're not going to do it. And they haven't brought it all year. And there's no reason to think pre-bye outside the division against an angry Saints team. This is a great spot. I mean, really, when I looked at this card early week, I don't usually look at Monday Night Football, but I really saw that, and I was like, oh, this is a great spot. Love the Saints tomorrow night.
Who dat?
That's the show for today. Guns, yeah.
I just said who dat.
Oh, yeah. Who dat? Saints, let's go. That's the show for today. $1.10 in the books. I know you guys are watching the Vikings. Apparently, Rodgers just got sacked.
He's up. He's good. He's fine.
Okay. But we appreciate you guys immensely. Sunday morning here, 11:45 a.m. Eastern, 8:45 Pacific. Hope you guys had a great Saturday night leading into Sunday morning. Let's have a dominant day. We love this card. We will commence upward movement yet again, because now we get information and we can actually look at things with real data. My top plays: New England minus 115, Indianapolis plus 3.5 now, Houston money line minus 118, Arizona plus 7.5, New Orleans plus 5.5. The gun collaboration, New England money line plus 108, Houston money line minus 118. 2 props. One of our guys was asking about the Washington game. We did discuss earlier in the show. We don't like the side. It's a push line. It's very hard to figure out. But the gun likes Jerome Ford, running back for the Browns, over 43.5 rush yards, over 10.5 attempts. Arizona plus 7.5, a third collab on this broadcast, and the Giants plus 7. And I think the gun is leaning strongly tomorrow night to the Saints.
It's pretty.
Beautiful show, beautiful.
It's as close to an official as there is an official.
Make it official. Make it official.
All right, throw it on my card. Give me the Saints. There you go. Done.
Official. Guns picks plus 5.5 Saints. So that's 4 collabs: New England, Houston, Arizona, and New Orleans. A lot of buy lows, a lot of sharp spots, divisional stuff, motivation, an opportunity to dominate. Guns picks, a pleasure as always. Close them out with some words, and let's go.
Yeah, we had a beautiful college football day. We're going to run it back in the NFL. We're on a little bit of a heater in the NFL. And thanks for everybody that's been watching and enjoying the analysis. Chewbacca, Ziggy Balls, the Candyman can always in the building. Wow, that hurt my throat. And everybody else that is watching didn't get into the chat. That's okay. Just please like and subscribe to the Guns Pick channel. Like and subscribe to the Shark Awareness Nation channel. And check us out on X, Guns Picks, and Shark in Sports 88 if you have not done so already. But we will be back once again Thursday Night Football for the Extra Points addition to that show. Let's dominate the board on this week 5. Let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the board. And as always, let's keep dancing. Yeah, bang.